Well, welcome to this podcast for the Western Caucus in the U.S. Senate. I'm Cynthia Lummis. I chair the Senate Western Caucus, and I've really been looking forward to today's podcast because we are with Alan Armstrong, the new U.S. Senator in the U.S. Senate, who is from the state of Oklahoma, and he comes to us in a very unusual way. So welcome, Senator Armstrong. It's wonderful to have you on our podcast. Can you tell us how you got here?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really exciting to get to talk to Cynthia. You've been such a kind and considerate face since I showed up at Senate, coming out of business, never having any political ambitions, never having any interest in being in the Senate. And then, the governor of Oklahoma asked me to, and he has the right in Oklahoma on an interim basis to make an appointment. And so Mark Wayne Mullins, who was in this seat, which was previously Senator Imhoff's seat. So he came into the seat, and then he got called up to be the DHS secretary. And then it was one of those things where it was kind of merry-go-round. Next thing I knew, I got a call from the governor saying, "Hey, could you be in my office Monday morning?" And he said, "Well, would you consider doing the Senate role?" And I was like, "What?" I said, I'm sure I can find somebody a lot better qualified. I'll help you. I know that, I can help you find somebody to be really qualified to do this. But I said, and I'm honored you'd even ask, obviously. But so that was a conversation. It was like 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't hear much back. I gave him some names that I thought would be good. And when I told him that, he said, "That's not what I asked you. I asked you if you'd be willing to do it if I asked you to." Anyway, he then called me up on a Saturday. I think that was like maybe the 19th or 20th of March, and said, "Hey, can you be in Florida to meet with President Trump tomorrow at 1 o'clock? And so I said, "Well, yeah, for what?" And so he's, "Well, I want to introduce you to him and about taking this role." So that was a Sunday, and then it got announced on a Monday night, and I got sworn in here then on Tuesday.
Yeah, isn't it a whirlwind?
Yeah.
I am so glad your governor was persistent with you, and I'm so glad that you said yes, because you bring such a unique background to the Senate, and it's one that we need right now because your area of interest and expertise is permitting reform. And that's something that now we're even seeing on a bipartisan basis is something that's sorely needed. So tell us how, because of your long-standing role with the Williams Company, which is a huge, highly respected Oklahoma-based company that Wyoming people are very, very familiar with, but so are others in the West and all over the country. You were both president and CEO and then sort of head of the board of directors, am I right?
Right.
Okay, tell us how, based on that experience, you came to view permitting as something you want to address.
Yeah, I actually started off as a field engineer for Williams back in 1986. And back then we could get stuff built. It wasn't all that complicated. There was requirements, environmental requirements, but it really, you could go and get stuff built. In fact, I spent a lot of my time in Wyoming, building out there in upstream of Reiner, Wyoming, by Rollins, and building out some of the gathering and processing systems there in that area. And, it just wasn't that hard to get stuff built. Over time, as I watched it, it just got crazier and crazier and harder to build, to the point where we want to fuss about high prices. We want to fuss about high gasoline prices in California. People want to fuss about high utility prices in New England. And yet we have some of the lowest cost resources sitting there available, but we won't build the infrastructure. California, kind of shut out everything, all fossil fuel. New England, particularly the governor of New York, shut down pipelines going across the state of New York to bring the lowest cost gas not just in the nation, but in some areas, the lowest cost gas in the world in the Marcellus and Utica.
And you're trying to get it into the New England states.
Which is some of the in the wintertime, some of the highest price.
Exactly.
It's only 120 miles. In Wyoming speak, that's nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, and so 120 miles away, we've got some of the lowest cost gas, some of the highest price gas. People are livid about their utility bills, and it's all because we've got a permitting process that allows people to stop critical infrastructure like that.
So the home heating oil that they use in New England and is extremely high priced is something that you, through the Williams Company, wanted to get to that market and save them all that money with clean burning natural gas, which is the cleanest burning hydrocarbon by far.
Right.
And lower their costs.
Right.
And they said no.
Right. And particularly the governor of New York said, can't cross my state with your pipeline, even though this was going through very rural areas that actually wanted the pipeline to come through the rural areas because they wanted access to, in most of those areas, they're either burning fuel oil or propane, and they wanted access, particularly the industries and the businesses wanted access to the low-cost natural gas. But in New York, which you figure out pretty quickly is it doesn't really make any difference if you're upstate New York. The only voters that really dictate anything are downstate in Manhattan. Yeah. And so the poor folks in New York, not only are they don't have access to that low-cost natural gas, there's tremendous gas reserves in the Marcellus that sit in New York. And they've banned fracking in New York.
They have.
And so they've stopped themselves from being able to take. I love taking people up there and showing them when you drive around in that area. In Pennsylvania, you drive by and you see these beautiful farms and ranches with brand new fences, big brand new four-wheel John Deeres everywhere you look. Beautiful. I mean, just really like you go, wow, these people are like, this looks like Kentucky ranches around here.
Exactly.
And then you go right across the border, and it is desolate and impoverished. It is because the people in Pennsylvania have had the benefit of getting the royalties off of all of the gas in that area. And the governor and the politics in New York have been anti-fossil fuel, and they've stopped. Not just they're stopping access for other people to access the gas, but the landowners in that area are stopped from being able to get the royalties off the gas in that market.
Yeah, so you saw this firsthand. You were boots on the ground trying to help people in America and couldn't get her done.
Right. And so it's just, it's crazy, some of the stuff. But I remember, I always kind of, when I think about Wyoming, I think about when I first started working there. And the last project that I was involved with there, which was the Overland Pass pipeline, which was a natural gas liquids pipeline that comes out of Kemmer, actually starts all the way down in the Piceance and then comes up to Kemmer and then across along I-80 and then south into Kansas. And that pipeline was held up for a year over studying to make sure we knew exactly where the three-toed jumping mouse habitat
the Preble's meadow jumping mouse?
Yes.
Oh, I know it well.
Yes.
I mean, I've never seen one because it's a subspecies.
We never found one. We never found one, but we looked and looked and looked and looked for them.
I hear ya.
And so I love the outdoors. I love wildlife. I love the fact that we work hard to protect our environment. But we can't exist as a nation and be competitive with other nations when we don't have balance to those decisions and we don't find ways to allow ourselves to mitigate that. It wasn't like we were going to, nobody said, hey, we found them. It was just, well, we need to study it further to make sure they're not here.
So where's the biggest bottleneck? Is it litigation? Is it time delays at the federal agency level? What's your
everybody
sense?
always thinks that it's the big bad federal agencies. And I will say that they are bureaucratic. I'm not going to say that they're speedy, but they're generally well-intended, effective agencies. The problem is that the litigation has forced all of these agencies to go, oh my God, we're going to get sued.
Yeah.
We better make sure we know exactly what's here.
Good
so
point.
it's all the litigation
Yeah.
that's on their heads that forces them to behave that way. And that litigation comes out of folks like the Sierra Club and Delaware Riverkeeper and you name it, a lot of folks that get paid to pick fights, basically. I mean, that's how they raise their money, is picking fights. And that litigation, though, is really what slows things down. But you also have situations, in fact, Wyoming is no stranger to this, actually. The 401 Water Quality Certificate, which is a state veto right. It was supposed to be set up to make sure that a state had the ability to work with the Corps of Engineers on a clean water permit, on the 404 permit. It was the state's rights to go, hey, we have these concerns that need to be dealt with. Well, that's because there's no description around that. Like, it doesn't say what the standards are for the clean water. It just says you get to sign off on saying that you're okay with it. Well, that's just turned into a completely political veto. Stopped the Millennium coal facility going out of state of Washington, which was a huge positive. And if you go back and read those denials, there's nothing in there about water quality. It's just, we hate fossil fuels, and we...
One would think the Commerce Clause would override this.
Yeah, but because the process is that the interstate commerce is managed, like the Natural Gas Act pipelines, the FERC oversees that, or is supposed to. But over time, the states have decided that they're not going to be a part of that overall federal process, and they're just going to do their own thing. And it is like, if you're raising money, if you're Governor Hochul or you're Governor Cuomo in New York, and you've got this complete control.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a real political weapon.
So what can we do about it as U.S. senators?
Yeah, so, one of the bills, in fact, we're going to be introducing a bill next week that I'm really excited about. And what we think needs to happen, particularly with the 401 Water Quality Certificate, is that it needs to be brought under the entire FERC process. So today, when we have an EIS, which, believe me, I remember when we first started having to do EIS, and I thought, this is going to be the death of our country. Like, this is crazy how much red tape this is.
Yeah.
And now I'm sitting here, it's gotten so bad, I'm sitting here saying, can we put this other process in with the EIS? That's how crazy it's gotten. But at least we could have one process instead of multiple process. So making sure that the 401 Water Quality Certificate is forced to work alongside fish and wildlife, all the other considerations. So when you're planning a route, whether it's a power transmission line or you're planning a pipeline, you choose this route based on all these other considerations. Landowners, where they'd like to see it go. So all of that goes into kind of a big confab, and everybody says, well, I think it should be here, and I think it should be here. And eventually you settle on a route, and whoever the lead agency stamps a certificate on it. But the states have said, no. We're going to wait until you get done with that, and then we'll tell you.
Oh, then you'll apply the veto,
and they can force you to go back to square one.
Oh, that's unreasonable.
Right. And so if you're back to square one, like, where does that end? Right?
Okay, so your bill, how would your bill address that?
So our bill would say that if all agencies, the state DEQs, the feds, everybody has to be a part of the same process. You can't have your own after-the-fact separate process, because it's completely untenable. You're going to always be in a do loop.
So that when does the state weigh in and say we're okay with this, or
as
we're
part
not?
of the so the environmental impact statement process, everybody gets a chance to weigh in and say, we think it should be here. Here's our concerns. Here's how this company's addressed them or not addressed them. And the FERC, like in the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, whoever the lead agency is when you're doing linear infrastructure, then they have the right to say, listen, Williams has done everything they possibly can on this. This is given all the other issues here, this is the best solution, because you can't design a route that makes every single person happy.
Absolutely
And
right.
so that overall process, though, all we're saying, I mean, this is, it's crazy to me that we can't even get this done. All we're saying is that the state 401 process should be part of the total process. It shouldn't be in its own orbit.
Well, I am so glad that the state of Oklahoma sent you here to help us with this, because you have that boots on the ground knowledge from all your years with Williams. You know where the bottlenecks are. This sounds like a very logical bill. I'm going to call your office when we're done and see if I can sign on as a
Excellent.
co-sponsor.
Fantastic.
And we're just so glad you're here, because your law is unique in Oklahoma in that you cannot run
Right.
for this position.
And I have a big smile on my face as you say that.
I'll bet now that you saw how hard it is, how many monkey wrenches there are in the process here. But even though you're only here for 1 year, I gotta say you really do bring some expertise to the Senate that we didn't have, and that is sorely needed. And I'm just so pleased that your governor was tenacious in asking you, and I'm so glad you just gave up your life for 2026 and are willing to roll up your sleeves and work on this. You are just a great addition to the U.S. Senate, and I'm so glad you would join me today on the Western Caucus podcast.
Well, thank you. Wyoming has always been a special place to me. It's always been a big place for Williams, and I've spent a ton of time there. Love the state, love the people. People there are very much kind of a can-do people, much the way Oklahomans are. And I always think how similar the culture is. I always feel pretty at home when I'm with people from Wyoming. So I'm really, really excited to get to be, on the podcast today, and so appreciate how welcoming and supportive you've been. So thank you.
Well, we're your wingman on
right.
this permitting stuff, so count us in. And
Excellent.
Again, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
For the Western Caucus podcast, I'm Cynthia Lummis. Please join us next time.